Often we think of fraud and waste as the work of some shadowy figure finding a way to scam an otherwise well-intentioned government program. Like all the COVID scams, for example. Those Somalis were just making sandwiches for kids. $250 million worth of sandwiches for kids. No, they weren't. They bought boats and lakefront property, and the list of kids they supposedly fed with all that money was generated from listofrandomnames.com, or Medicare fraud, or Social Security fraud, or the like. It's a well-intentioned program, but unfortunate that some find a way to abuse. But what if the intent of the government program is the money laundering? It is to make the program look like some great helpful thing for social betterment, but really it is designed as a scam to make a few friends of the politicians rich on the backs of the rest of us. And don't get me wrong, we can make that argument about pretty much any federal spending, and we should. The federal government's role is securing our rights, not buying us stuff. But what has happened at the EPA over the last year or so sure looks like a particularly egregious example of government as a get-rich-quick scheme. Back in December, Project Veritas got some clues from an outgoing EPA implementation officer, as in guy who dishes out all the grant money for that agency. He said to the Veritas reporter, "Man, it's been awfully stressful down at the office lately. We've been scrambling to move billions of EPA grant dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act, but we gotta hurry before Trump gets inaugurated, so the money can't be stopped or taken back."
So now we're just like getting it out as quick as possible.
Right. Yeah. To the tune of $50 billion.
No, it's like $2 billion at this point. But yeah, we've got most of it up, like 90% is out. But
wow.
Yeah.
And what happens if they try to stop it? They can't?
When they come in, if you haven't gotten out the door, then they can stop it.
If they don't get it out by a certain date, what's that date?
It's the inauguration, the 20th. It's renewed on the 20th of January.
Throw a couple billion here and there.
It's until the Trump people come in and tell us we can no longer give out money.
See, the EPA used to care about basic oversight, but now it's really just about dumping all this money to politically friendly causes to make sure all those left-wing climate nonprofits are well funded through the Trump years.
I do like how do you spend $100 billion? How do you make sure that they're the proper, well, until recently, how do you make sure the proper processes are in place to prevent fraud and to prevent abuse and to ensure that we are funding good paying jobs and that sort of stuff. Now it's just how to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and it was a insurance policy against Trump winning. So these are basically nonprofit institutions that will cover the entire country. They could have been a government agency, but because they aren't, they're safer from Republicans taking the money away.
So no, it is not responsible public stewards carefully and ethically managing the public dollar. Now it's just chucking gold bars off the Titanic.
It truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing gold bars off the edge.
Does it really?
And I guess in this metaphor, they steal your lifeboat too. Out of the way. The government has a child.
I have a child? I have a child? Get up out of there! Please, I have a child! Please, I'm all she has in the world.
Now, of course, the gold bars are going straight to Planned Parenthood to make sure the next kid never lives to have such utility. But hey, to this guy's point, you gotta be resourceful. Now, in response to that clip, new EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin pledged to find the sort of activity that guy was talking about, and as he announced last week, he believes that he has.
Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly 20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency.
Shut up, Lee. Nobody elected you. We all voted for Citibank and a bunch of obscure left-wing nonprofits nobody's ever heard of before because they exist solely off the government cookie jar. And that is what happened here. Within the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which you'll recall was passed on strictly partisan lines in both the House and the Senate, a 50-50 Senate tie was broken by Kamala Harris, who later insisted that she's not Joe Biden and had nothing to do with his record. Within that bill was this $20 billion fund that Zeldin is talking about, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, whatever that means. But just like the Inflation Reduction Act itself, the only thing we know for sure is it has nothing to do with that title. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a giant pile of money with a very loosely defined purpose, so it sure looks a lot like the sort of Democrat insurance policy slush fund that the guy in the Veritas video was talking about. $20 billion to be awarded at the EPA administrator's discretion, so long as the recipients somewhere down the line do something related to renewable energy development. Hilariously, the EPA administrator is directed in the law to prioritize funding projects that would otherwise lack access to financing, as in projects by less than reputable people, to do things that aren't market viable. Low credit? No credit? Forget that sketchy high-interest lender in the daytime TV ad. Try government. You keep the money, and default is the point. Now, while the EPA administrator having control of these funds isn't necessarily odd given the way that Congress operates, it is an important point to understand with all the scrutiny and pushback against DOGE. Oh, you can't stop that money. Congress appropriated that money. Well, that's just it. According to the law that Congress passed, it's to be distributed according to administrator discretion, as in according to the judgment of the executive branch, including not distributed at all. There's a deadline on disbursement, so the executive branch not awarding that money is every bit as valid as the prior hustle to dish it out fast, according to the congressional intent within the law itself. Congress just said, do your best job, Mr. EPA man, according to you. So what exactly was that best job under the prior EPA administrator, Michael Reagan, under Joe Biden? Well, as we heard Zeldin say, there are several things that are unusual about this $20 billion cookie jar. One, the money was actually moved to a private bank account at Citibank, meaning the money is then out of the government's hands, making it harder for the government to recover. Now, I don't know how common that practice is, but Zeldin says it isn't, at least at his agency.
This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight.
And two, $20 billion is a big jar of cookies, even by government standards. For all that money to go to only 8 recipients is awfully strange. To manage all that money, you would think that these would be organizations that you've obviously heard of if their presence and reach are so financially large. But no, of course not. Not even the most dedicated progressive activist ever has heard of any of these organizations. And in the case of the most suspicious one of them all, you couldn't have heard of this particular one because it did not exist before it started collecting this money. One recipient of $2 billion of those grant dollars is a nonprofit called Power Forward Communities. Supposedly, this organization is going to finance home energy efficiency projects for underserved groups, but I use future tense because they never actually have. At least, this organization hasn't. It's a 501c3 charity formed in 2023 after the Inflation Reduction Act passed and right before that money started going out the next year. Now, what sort of work has Power Forward Communities done to earn the confidence of $2 billion government bucks? None. According to their most recent tax filing for 2023, which accounted for only 3 months of operation since they started that October, the organization had 0 employees, or at least 0 employees earning significant pay. And they couldn't have been earning any pay, at least through their own money, because they collected just $100 in revenue. Now, in fairness, this organization was formed by people who do have experience in this general area, but to Zeldin's point, who exactly are these people? Are they experienced home builders? Are they technologically advanced electricians? Are they renewable energy innovators? Or, as Zeldin asks, are they just Democrat operatives in disguise?
How do these organizations decide how to allocate funding? How much money have they given out so far and to whom? Are there any former Biden EPA staffers who are now working at these entities?
Oh, don't be ridiculous. They're not Biden people. There are no Biden people. They're Obama people. Sean Donovan, the director and co-chair of Power Forward Communities, is Obama's former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and Obama's director of the Office of Management and Budget. The other director and co-chair, Ari Matusiak, was a special Obama assistant. Most of the people leading this nonprofit are also in leadership at another nonprofit called Enterprise Community Partners, which works on affordable housing for underserved groups, and is established and operating. But even if we grant that this one is a legitimate operation and therefore the new nonprofit, Power Forward Communities, has experience by proxy, experience at what scale? Because Enterprise Community Partners had an annual revenue of about $110 million in 2023, the last year of reporting. That is just 6% of the $2 billion these people have now received from their friends in DC. So even if they did good work previously, good enough work to be awarded almost 20 times more than they've ever had before? And if the Democrat connections weren't already convincing enough, enter Stacey Abrams, the twice-defeated Georgia gubernatorial candidate or actual two-term Georgia governor, depending on who you ask. She is also in leadership connected to Power Forward Communities. Abrams is the chief lawyer for Rewiring America, one of the subgroups in this glob of Democrat operations that forms Power Forward Communities. And she tweeted in October 2023 how thrilled she was to be a part of this new Power Forward Communities project. And of course, Stacey Abrams isn't just any old generic Democrat either. She was a top Biden ally. She was one of the last to support him as late as mid-July last summer, well after that disastrous debate that ended his career. Though I don't think she was actually wrong in that particular op-ed assessment. I do think even that basically dead Joe Biden would have performed better in November than Kamala Harris did. But hey, just because they're Democrats doesn't mean that they're ineligible for congressionally appropriated federal funding, right? What if they actually do good work? Exactly the sort of good work that Congress intended. Well, one, great. Now show us the work. They can't because it doesn't exist. Power Forward Communities has one press release on its website announcing the $2 billion they've received, pledging to go house by house and family by family to make these energy efficiency upgrades. But there's no demonstration of the productive work that money has actually purchased, though it's coming right about now, so just you wait and see. Which houses? Which families? So far, that demonstration doesn't exist, or even a specific explanation for where it will. And two, it probably won't be demonstrated because they don't have to demonstrate it. The Inflation Reduction Act requires no such performance benchmarks. It requires no oversight at all, actually. Here, just take the money and do your best non-market viable job. Or at least the law requires no oversight if the EPA administrator doesn't want to. But there is a new sheriff in town who does want to. The problem is the money already went to that private bank account, and so now getting whatever hasn't been spent already back is less than legally clear.
Here's my position as EPA administrator. The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic. EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all of these funds.
At this point, discovery of the fraud and abuse is no longer the bombshell. The bombshell is finding the guy who actually did receive what this money was promised to provide. If we ever do discover such a mythical creature, that's the story that's going to break the internet.
Last year, qualified and competent technicians from Power Forward Communities upgraded my home into modern energy efficiency. I thank them for these critical services that the market never would have otherwise provided.
I had to protect that guy's identity to make sure nobody tries to dig into him, because if they do, they will quickly discover that just like any government program for efficiency, he doesn't actually exist. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on X, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those live on Wednesday and Sunday nights. Looking forward to it. Come on. Hey, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you probably found some value in the video. If you found some value in the video, please consider supporting my material. You can do that one time or recurring for as little as $1 a month. It not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make my videos possible. Linked in the description for you, mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Thanks for listening.